I arrived yesterday evening at Aachen, and since then I'm like immersed in Iranian way of thinking and eating and listening to. And as I say, you can't learn swimming by touching the water. You need to immerse in that. So thank you for everything, and thank you also for the organizer, Isa, for having me. Now let me ask a question to you. How many of you know two very successful startups? Quite a few people. How many of you know two failed startups? This number goes down, right? And how many of you had, in those two successful startups, SAP? You see no one, right? Now I ask this question because I personally have been, I work at SAP and I've been very nicely introduced. SAP is, and people ask me the question, how come your relationship with entrepreneurship comes? SAP is a very large corporation with 67,000 people globally. But just as most of you don't know SAP, SAP is a 42-year-old company. When they achieved 40th birthday, SAP was Germany's most valuable company on the DAX. And it's an iconic success of an entrepreneurial venture of 5 people in Germany, which makes it SAP's world's #1 business software company. How do we, on a year-on-year basis successful? It's about innovation and entrepreneurship. Just wanted to introduce SAP as well to you, and the fact that we don't know a lot of things sitting next to us which are very good. So we need to believe in ourselves, what we have nearby, before also looking at too far. So that's a couple of talks with our slide. Of course, as I was introduced, entrepreneurship is something which I am very passionate about. I help support a few companies. I have 2 companies besides the network, which I essentially support with all the resources I have. Now, you want to learn from me about Indian diaspora, what they are doing, how they are working. What I will do in the next few minutes is essentially, briefly I'll talk about in general, about diaspora, Indian diaspora here in Germany, and then I'll showcase the network we have. And while doing that, you will know how it is working and why it is successful and how we are kind of operating globally. So Indian diaspora in Germany is not very large. We have more Indians in the US, Australia, because it's easy. They have the same language, only the language, the literature language, not that they speak the same real language. It's true, and I probably can use some examples afterwards. But it's very, while Indian diaspora among itself is very diverse, it's also very fragmented. Just to give you a fact, in Frankfurt region, there are roughly 25,000 Indians, roughly. And there are 23 network focused on cultural activities. So it's very fragmented. So we are not like Moroccan organization, probably Ethiopian, and so on. We are not well organized. That's the fact we have. There's another thing which is important, which I want to share. 3 years back, we founded this network. We looked at it. Essentially, all the networks we have focused on India is either culture or the Chamber of Commerce. There's nothing about professional network. There's nothing about entrepreneurship. So that's the origin of few of us thinking about setting up a network here in Germany. So I think you have to remind me of time. So I'll just talk what I just talked about this slide already. So let me go here. So what is let me say one more sentence. When you talk about entrepreneurship, our corporate world essentially, we talk about what impact we have created. We don't talk about history. Efforts are made, it's fine. What impact we created. That's our bottom line. And now I'll go to try So I'll present you a very successful example of Indian diaspora. TIE Global was founded 1992-93 time frame in US, in the heart of entrepreneurship, what we call today Silicon Valley, by some very successful Indian Americans. And when I say very successful, they are really big people, like Vinod Khosla, the founder of Sun Microsystem, like Kanwal Rekhi, like Deshpande, and so on. So it's a very old organization. It is created for the cause of promoting entrepreneurship. It's not that it was created to promote diaspora as such, but it was created for the cause of entrepreneurship. And because there's so many successful Indians are there, it became a diaspora activity over a period of time. So we have 62 chapters around the globe. There are 6 in Europe. We have one of them in Germany. Briefly, about 13,000 members, and we have 2,300 charter members. And I'll touch on that point in a minute. And there's a few more details which you can look at. Look at it already on the slide. What I want to focus on how we are fostering entrepreneurship. So TIE has 3 pillars. We talk about education, we talk about mentoring, we talk about networking. I mean, nothing happens without networking in general in life. At least I can talk about from a corporate perspective. When I talk about education, TIE is not doing classroom education, basic research, fundamental research, and so on. It's more like very practical aspects. How does the online marketing works? What are the company structure you can have in Germany, for example? That's what we talk about in a workshop or in the short sessions. Mentoring is essentially helping young new entrepreneurs to become a successful entrepreneur. That's a framework of TIE, and that's basically what we replicated in Germany in 2011. It took a long time for TIE to have a chapter here in Germany, but that's what we replicated in 2011. We are 40 plus members, so it's not big, we have decent size. We have sponsors, corporate sponsored, and we work very closely with the significant support from the Indian consulate and the embassies. So that's about briefly about TIE, what we have from a global perspective and what we've done in Germany. I want to focus on members. So we are structured in 3 layers of members. One is chartered member, the associate member, and student members. So student and associate member, essentially the major difference is the fee, but both of them could be potentially interested to become an entrepreneur. That's the category. Chartered members are one who pay a lot of money. They pay, just to give you perspective, around 10 times the fees of associate member, and the one who are very experienced. Now the foundation here is that we expect people not to give only money, but also experiences. And essentially those are the people, when we select charter members, we're talking about people who are willing to give back to the society, give back to the people who still want to learn. So that giving back philosophy is the underlying principle of how the membership is structured. Let me quickly go to a couple of more slides. Now, as I said, when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's all about creating impact. Now earlier, and I want to briefly touch on the point which we heard earlier. One of the key things about entrepreneurs are, they don't have historical data. You all agree with that? Normally they don't have historical data. So how, and most of the key successes comes from a new entrepreneur. How it happens. So we earlier were talking about history and so on, so I want to give my perspective here. History gives us a lot of learning, a lot of lessons, what to do, what not to do. But you need an out-of-the-box thinking of an entrepreneur to be successful. If you combine that, that's when we become successful. If you just rely and try to rebuild on the history, it's very difficult to be successful. Most of the plan, most of the forecast go wrong. Go back and check how many times, if you take the example of M&As, merger and acquisitions, I think 80% fails. And nobody has the track of what synergies we talked about. So forecast and planning is important to run an organization, to run an operation, but it is not ensuring success for you. What ensures success is what history we have, what data we have, what learnings we made out of it, how you interpret it, and then think out of the box. That's when you get success, and that's what we talk about when we talk about entrepreneurship. And at the end, our success are measured by the impact we create. So this is not about Thai Global, this is about Thai Deutschland. So these are the companies which was founded by the members we have. Within 1 year, 1.5 years, we have done basically, we created what is called Frappe. Is not the Thai Deutschland wanted to create. Is a set of students from Goethe University in Frankfurt, attended some of our events, had discussion with us, and went and create what is called Frankfurt People Powering Entrepreneurship. They created their own network within the Frankfurt region. So it's all about creating entrepreneurial spirit. They went and created that. We started a business plan competition, and here I want to bring a bit of diaspora thing as well. You see a company in between, it's a beer company. With all due respect of your drinking and non-drinking habits, I don't want to get there. It's a company called St. Erhard. I live in Germany for 12 years, and I never realized that there is no German beer in India. There's Heineken, there's Carlsberg, there's everything, but there's no German beer, and you have thousands of breweries here, right? A set of students from here went on exchange program to Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. Two important points here. Indian Institute of Management Ahmedabad is India's best management institute. It's in a state called Gujarat, where there's a 100% alcohol ban. Young students, 25 years of age, German students, going to Germany, how can they live without beer, right? So they asked their parents to send. It's a real story I'm talking about. The parents sent some beer to them. That's when they got the idea that there's no German beer in India, why don't we venture it out? They came back, they partnered with one Indian student and 2 German. They set up a brewery here, and last November they sent the first lot of beers. So it's a unique example for me of a student exchange, and they get a lot of support from the diaspora. So we are a mentor student. Diaspora helping some business and trade, and it's a very unique thing. It's also helping. So this is like one of the key examples I talk about. It's a very simple, small example, but it talks about how we can learn together. And in my concluding slide, you'll see what I want to talk about here with this as one example. Of course, we've done a few other companies during the last 1.5 years, and quite a few mentoring sessions we were working on. Not that I want to impress you with that, that's not the objective. Last time when we had one of the largest events in Frankfurt with roughly around 145 people attending, we were ourselves impressed when we looked at the registration list. And what impressed me most was that I somehow found all kind of people you need to be successful, to have a success of, entrepreneurial success in the registration. That's when we got the idea to create a slide, to show to the audience themselves that how rich audience we have here. What also impressed me is that there are so many people interested in diaspora. Now I'll talk about one more point. Germany, we have every institute in Germany has an entrepreneurship center, most of them. If I'm right, most of them have. Every local city, state supports entrepreneurial activities. Why do people listen to me when I talk about TIE? So that was a challenge we faced when we're talking about promoting entrepreneurship. Why not I join another organization? So we have 2 differentiators. One is, of course, our India Connect. The knowledge of India. It's a big market, everyone talks about it. Second, TIE is global organization. We have Global Connect. We're present in 16 countries with 62 chapters around the globe. That's the differentiator in the local entrepreneurial ecosystem, which we bring here from TIE's perspective. And that's the reason why people get attracted. And these are not the companies which are run by Indians. These are companies run by, they're big companies as well, they're small companies. They're not all Indians. So if you would have been in the room, there will be around, while the membership base, 70% is Indian, but in the room, you'll find around 30-35% Indians. So there's a lot of interest people have, the German people have. I would not say only India, there are other countries that are interested in as well. Of course, I earlier learned that India's GDP was 8-9%. No, it's last 2 years it has come down to below 5%, 4.7 to be more precise this year. But we definitely go back to 8-9%. That's not a challenge we'll face. And companies are still interested. People are interested, not only doing business with larger companies, but they're also interested to work with the small and medium-sized companies. So that's what we took away from the registration, and that's the reason I wanted to present this slide to you. So I'm perfect on time. I prepared for 15 minutes and I got more time, so it was perfect on time. Now before I go on to my last concluding slide, I just wanted to touch on, earlier there was a discussion around India, China, there was a discussion around Iran and India. I'm not the expert on everything, and I rather would like to avoid getting into the discussion. But what I'd like to point, this is my personal impression, China was, at some point of time, was a bit behind India as well. If you look at the history, if I look at one of the mistakes first Indian Prime Minister did, in my opinion, so this is quote unquote myself, was he thought China is going to be behind India with us. So he was the one who was, if you look at the history, he was the one who was introducing Chinese leaders to the world leaders. And today, in the United Nations Security Council, we don't say it, they say it. So I'm not concerned with that. What I'm going to point out is two things. My personal understanding of China is, the little knowledge I have, is first of all, they have a fantastic execution machine. Of course, there's an impact of having a government setup which is not kind of democratic, but they're a fantastic execution machine. And probably they thought a lot of things out of the box, very big. Who can think about connecting the whole China, like such a huge country, by the roads and the bridges? So they thought a lot of, out of the box thinking without looking at history. What of course they do is remind other people in the world about China's history. But they don't try to think and discuss about history, but rather think out of the box what we can do in future, and go and stand in Washington and say, China's history is this. You can look at the Chinese leaders' visit speech and you can figure out what I'm talking about. If I look at India, we are also a lot of pockets in India. Very happy about our speeches, our history, and we talk a lot about history. And that's where we kind of miss the bus. I have no real information around Iran, so I cannot compare. But as I said in my summary, it's more important to look at history to learn and then move on with the new thinking. To conclude from my side, I see diaspora playing a role in these 3 building blocks. Establishing connections. This is what is happening in most cases. If I look at India, there's a lot of trade discussions, there are business partner search. You find people, students coming, the people coming for the job here, going back, knowledge sharing. There's a lot of things that are happening. What is not happening, are happening in very small pockets, is the second point, and that's what I personally think we need to spend, to be an equal partner. And I would like to call upon all of you to talk about as an equal partner to everyone. We are all human beings and we need to be equal partners. Co-creation of knowledge and co-innovation. Germany, for example, has a demography problem that's going to bring huge impact on the pension and the healthcare budgets. And we have General Electric working with fuel innovation in India, having a very small portable ultrasound machine. Why cannot we think about very low cost items also coming to the developed world if it can do this, it can provide the solution what we are looking at. So we have to look at those kind of co-innovation and talk about co-creation of knowledge. Because we all have some great knowledge as well. The third point, I think this happens, but the outward and inward investments, of course, if I look at from India's side, the inward investments have three categories. One is remittance from the diaspora, which should continue. There's large money which goes to India from diaspora. There's some investment going from these countries, and also there's some aid funds which goes. But what is missing is outward investments, and I think I can see Iran has a lot of money, I know. So that's very important. Think about how you can bring that money for positive change here as well to increase the represents yourself. I want to talk about the same thing for Indian businesses who have been very successful to start bringing money here as well to this part of the world. And I think diaspora can play a good role of helping manage the opportunity, the process, and the governance around that. With that, I will close my speech.